This is Fort Lowell near Tucson, Arizona, soon after it was built. It had no wall. The hostile Indians in the area were Apaches, who usually operated in small groups of only a couple of dozen warriors. There was little chance of them attacking the fort. This is the officers' quarters row. Administration building, bakehouse, guardhouse or jail, telegraph office, post trader's store. The quartermaster warehouse. That's the hospital on the left bottom. Barracks number 4, barracks number 3, barracks number 2, barracks number 1, and the quartermaster warehouse. That on the top is the quartermaster corral, and on the bottom is the cavalry corral. The quartermaster had their own horses. Cavalry had their own horses. They kept separate. These are the little houses for the women who did the laundry for the soldiers. This is the hospital. Barracks number 4, barracks number 3, barracks number 2, barracks number 1, and the quartermaster warehouse. Telegraph office, guardhouse, bakehouse, administration, and the officers' houses. That's barracks number 4. That's the hospital and the kitchen building behind the hospital. Today the fort is a Tucson City Park. This is the way Fort Lowell looks today. This is a statue to memorialize the soldiers who served at Fort Lowell. Cavalrymen blowing a bugle. This is the real soldiers from Fort. The Apaches would attack stagecoaches, freight wagons, isolated farms, and ranches. The soldiers fought many small skirmishes with them. There's not much left of Fort Lowell today. This is a replica of the original flagpole. This green lawn area is the same area as the original parade ground for Fort Lowell. That's a modern picnic ramada. In the background is the remains of the hospital, the Fort Hospital. This is barracks number 4. It was next to the hospital. Each barracks had its own kitchen and privy or outhouse. This is all that's left of barracks number 4 today. There's a small mound of dirt about 1 or 2 inches high. That's all that's left of the adobe wall of barracks number 4. This is the hospital as it looked during the time the fort was being used. This is the west side wall. The hospital had 12 rooms for patients. In the background is a windmill used for pumping water up out of the ground. This was common for ranches and farms of that time. This is the way the west wall of the hospital looks today. Those adobe bricks are 138 years old. Adobe is basically dried mud brick. Its worst enemy is the rain, which over time literally washes the adobe walls away. A modern roof protects the surviving adobe. This shows the plaster, a kind of plaster, adobe plaster, that was used on the inside of the walls. It's very cracked now, but it used to be smooth and whitewashed when the fort was being used. This is the east side of the hospital. This is the north side of the hospital. It's not very wide. This is the north side of the hospital today. The outside north side wall no longer exists. This is actually looking at rooms inside the hospital. Bushes have been allowed to grow where the inside of the hospital used to be. Those are creosote bushes, the most common native bush in the Tucson area. This is the south side wall. Actually, that's the interior room. There's not much left of the south side wall either. Here's the original south side wall. This is the south side. That used to be the office, the doctor's office. This is now on the east side. That's a modern reconstruction of the door frame. The adobe is original, though. There is this wide opening. It makes it look like two separate buildings. Originally, this was a wide hallway. There was a door at each end. In the wintertime, the door would be closed, and in the summertime, the doors would be open. They had no air conditioning, no evaporative coolers, no electric fans. All they had was the natural breezes to blow through the place, hoping that would cool it. This is a room, one of the patients' room. It's not very big. It's only about 8 feet by 12 feet, and they put 2 beds in there. Each room had a large window. That's the hospital in the background, looking back across the lawn, which was the original parade ground for the fort. This is Cottonwood Lane. This is a reconstruction of the way it was during the fort. The soldiers planted trees. This is the fence line of the modern park, which was the line where the barracks used to be. This is barracks number 3. About 20 years after the fort closed. It was already a ruins. That's because local people stripped it of all the lumber, the wood, the frames out of the windows, the doors, the floor planks, the roof planks, the porches, and so on. This is all that's left of barracks number 3 today. That's barracks number 3. Along that fence line would have been barracks number 2, but nothing is left of it today. At the end of the fence line are the remains of barracks number 1. That's barracks number 4, number 3. This is barracks number 1. This is the quartermaster warehouse that no longer exists. This is barracks number 1, all that's left of it. Across the street would have been the quartermaster warehouse. It's just a few adobe bricks. That's the same bricks from a different angle. This is officers' quarter number 3, or officers' house number 3. It is a modern recreation of the original. The fort had 7 officers' houses. They were all basically the same. They were fairly large houses, but oftentimes 2 officers' families would have to share one house. This is the west side of the house. Now this is the kitchen building. Each officer's house had a kitchen building out back. They kept the buildings separate because they used wood for the cooking fires, which produced a lot of smoke and a lot of heat, which you did not want to mix with the house, especially in the summertime. This is the back of the officer's house number 3. If you look carefully, all 4 sides are basically the same. They use the same plan for each side of the house, basically. That's officer house number 3. Officer's house number 2 would have been where the modern street now is. Across the street is officer's house number 1, which is not on public display. This is an old building, but it was built after the fort closed. There in the background is officer's house number 1. This is the officer's house. That's officer's house number 3, number 2, and number 1. This is number 1 the way it looks today. All that lumber is relatively modern. It's put there to keep the walls from falling down. It has nothing to do with the original building. All the original wood is stripped from the building, either that or decayed. There's very little original wood left. This is the back of officer's house number 1. Again, the wood is modern, placed there in modern times to keep the walls from falling down. That's also a modern kind of plaster applied to the adobe there to protect it, try to protect it. The rain and wind and time have virtually destroyed Fort Lowell. This destruction was something the Apache leader Geronimo could only dream about doing.